The divorce papers were still warm from the printer when Elena Martinez collapsed in the courthouse hallway, her wedding ring rolling across the marble floor like a final desperate plea. If you're curious to hear the full story, make sure to hit subscribe and share in the comments where you're tuning in from. I love seeing how far this reaches. Tomorrow, I've got another unbelievable story coming your way, just as wild as this one. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. The mahogany conference table stretched between them like an ocean of regret. Elena Martinez sat perfectly still, her manicured fingers folded in her lap, watching her husband of 12 years sign document after document with the same methodical precision he used to build his empire. Each signature felt like a small death. Initial here, Mr. Hartwell, the lawyer's voice cut through the silence. And here, Daniel Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Industries, worth $200 million, and soon-to-be ex-husband, didn't look up. His silver Mont Blanc pen moved across the papers with practiced efficiency. To anyone watching, he appeared completely composed. But Elena noticed the slight tremor in his left hand, the one he thought no one ever saw. She wanted to reach across that impossible distance and still his shaking fingers, the way she used to during his panic attacks in the early days of his business. Back when he still let her see his fears. Back when he still came home. Mrs. Martinez? The lawyer turned to her with papers of her own. The name felt foreign now. She'd kept her maiden name professionally, but had dreamed of being Mrs. Hartwell. That dream was dying with today's signatures. Elena's hand moved toward the pen, then hesitated. Through the conference room's floor-to-ceiling windows, she could see couples walking hand in hand in the courthouse square below. Young love, oblivious to how fragile it all was. Elena. Daniel spoke her name for the first time in 3 hours. His voice was rougher than usual, as if he hadn't used it in days. You don't have to do this. She looked up, startled. His dark eyes met hers across the table, really met them, for the first time in months. For a heartbeat, she saw the man who used to bring her coffee in bed, who once drove 4 hours to surprise her with tickets to see her favorite Broadway show. Yes, I do, she whispered, because staying would mean watching him disappear a little more each day behind walls of work and success and carefully controlled distance. The pen felt impossibly heavy in her hand. Daniel's jaw tightened as he watched her sign. She was still beautiful, more beautiful than the day he'd met her at that charity gala 7 years ago. Her dark hair was pulled back in that elegant chignon she wore to important events, and she was wearing the navy dress he'd once said made her eyes look like sapphires. Had she worn it on purpose? He pushed the thought away. Elena was leaving because he'd given her no choice. Because building his company had meant sacrificing everything else, including the marriage he treasured more than any acquisition. Because he'd been too proud and too scared to tell her that every success felt hollow without her smile waiting for him at home. That concludes our business here, the lawyer announced, gathering papers with practiced efficiency. The decree will be final in 30 days. 30 days. Daniel had closed billion-dollar deals faster than his marriage had taken to officially die. They stood simultaneously, an awkward choreography of avoidance. Elena gathered her purse, the Hermes bag he'd given her for their 10th anniversary, back when he still remembered anniversaries. Elena, he started to speak, then stopped. What was there to say? I'm sorry I chose money over you. I'm sorry I forgot how to be a husband. The words would sound as empty as their penthouse had felt for the past 6 months. She paused at the door, not turning around. Take care of yourself, Daniel. Try to remember to eat something other than protein bars and coffee. Even now, in the wreckage of everything they'd built, she was taking care of him. The door closed behind her with a soft click that might as well have been a gunshot. Daniel stood alone in the conference room, surrounded by the scent of her perfume and the weight of his choices. Through the window, he could see her emerging onto the courthouse steps, her phone pressed to her ear. Probably calling her sister Maria, who'd warned Elena from the beginning that marrying a workaholic would break her heart. He should leave. Should go back to his office, lose himself in the quarterly reports waiting on his desk. Should start the process of learning how to be alone again. Instead, he found himself following her outside. Elena was halfway down the courthouse steps when the world tilted sideways. The phone slipped from her hand, clattering against the stone. Her vision blurred, and suddenly the ground was rushing up to meet her. The last thing she heard before darkness claimed her was Daniel's voice, raw with panic, shouting her name. What do you think caused Elena's collapse? Drop a comment with your theory. The ambulance siren cut through Daniel's chest like broken glass. He sat beside Elena's unconscious form, her hand limp and cold in his, watching the paramedic adjust her foreline with practiced calm. BP's dropping, the paramedic called to his partner. We need to move faster. Daniel's throat constricted. What's happening to her? Sir, we're doing everything we can. Is there any medical history we should know about? Medical history. Daniel realized with a sickening jolt that he didn't know. When had he stopped paying attention to the woman he'd promised to love in sickness and in health? When had board meetings become more important than the shadows under her eyes, the way she'd been picking at her food during their last few dinners together? I don't know. The admission tasted like ash. Elena's face was porcelain pale against the stretcher, her usually perfect hair mussed and fragile-looking. Without her careful composure, she looked heartbreakingly young, vulnerable in a way that made something crack open in his chest. The hospital corridors blurred past in a kaleidoscope of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. Daniel found himself relegated to a waiting room chair while Elena disappeared behind emergency room doors that might as well have been prison bars. What do you think Daniel is realizing about himself as he sits in that waiting room? Daniel. He looked up to find Dr. Patricia Chun, Elena's longtime physician, approaching with a manila folder clutched against her chest. Her expression was carefully neutral, but Daniel had negotiated enough deals to read the tension in her shoulders. How is she? He stood, his legs unsteady. Dr. Chen glanced around the busy waiting room, then gestured toward a quieter corner. Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. How much do you know about Elena's recent health concerns? Health concerns. The words felt foreign. She seemed fine. Tired maybe, but we've both been under stress with the... He couldn't finish the sentence. She's been my patient for 3 years, Dr. Chen said gently. She's been coming in for tests, consultations. I assumed you knew. The floor seemed to shift beneath his feet. Tests for what? Dr. Chen opened the folder, revealing pages of medical reports that might as well have been written in a foreign language. Elena has been experiencing symptoms for the past 8 months. Fatigue, dizziness, irregular heartbeat. We've been monitoring a condition called dilated cardiomyopathy. Cardio, what does that mean? Her heart is enlarged and weakened. It's not pumping blood efficiently. Dr. Chen's voice was clinical, but her eyes were kind. Daniel, this isn't something that develops overnight. The stress, the emotional strain, it can be a contributing factor. The words hit him like physical blows. 8 months. 8 months she'd been sick, scared, facing medical tests alone while he buried himself deeper in quarterly projections and merger negotiations. Is she going to be okay? We've stabilized her for now, but she needs rest, medication, and significant lifestyle changes. The collapse today was her body's way of saying it can't handle any more stress. Dr. Chen paused, studying his face. Daniel, she's going to need support. Family. People who care about her. Family. The word echoed mockingly in his head. He'd just signed papers to legally stop being her family. Can I see her? She's sedated, but yes. Room 314. The elevator ride felt endless. Daniel's hands trembled as he pushed open the door to Elena's room, and the sight that greeted him nearly brought him to his knees. She looked so small against the white hospital sheets, dwarfed by machines and monitors that beeped with mechanical precision. Her dark hair spilled across the pillow like silk, and her face was peaceful in a way he hadn't seen in months. On the bedside table sat her purse, and spilling from it were pill bottles, at least 6 of them, with dates going back months. Heart medications. Prescriptions he'd never seen, never known about. Daniel sank into the chair beside her bed, his successful businessman facade crumbling completely. She'd been fighting this battle alone while he'd been fighting for market share and profit margins. Elena. Her name came out as a broken whisper. God, what have I done? As if responding to his voice, she stirred slightly. Her eyelids fluttered, And then those sapphire blue eyes he'd fallen in love with were looking at him with confusion and something that might have been hope. Daniel. Her voice was barely audible. What are you doing here? You collapsed. At the courthouse. He leaned forward, desperate to touch her but afraid he'd lost that right. Elena, why didn't you tell me? About your heart. A tear slipped down her cheek. When? Between your conference calls and business trips? When you stopped coming to bed until after I was asleep? Her voice cracked. I tried, Daniel. I tried so many times. The truth of her words cut deeper than any business rival's betrayal ever could. He remembered now, half-heard conversations when she'd started to say something about doctor's appointments. How he'd glanced at his phone, muttered "That's nice, honey," and walked away. I'm so sorry, he whispered, the words wholly inadequate. Elena closed her eyes, exhaustion evident in every line of her face. We signed the papers, Daniel. It's done. No. The word came out with surprising strength. Elena, look at me. She opened her eyes, and he saw his own devastation reflected there. I know I don't deserve it, he said, his voice steady for the first time all day. But let me be here. Let me help you through this. What do you think Elena's response will be to Daniel's plea? Share your thoughts below. Elena turned her face away from Daniel, staring at the bland hospital wall as if it held answers to questions she couldn't voice. The heart monitor's steady beeping filled the silence between them like a metronome counting the seconds of their shattered life. You should go, she whispered, her voice barely stronger than the whisper of air through the room's ventilation system. Maria is coming. She'll handle everything from here. Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. Maria, Elena's fiercely protective older sister who'd never hidden her disdain for him, especially in recent years. Maria, who'd probably been the one Elena called during those doctor visits he'd been too busy to attend. I want to stay. Since when? The words came out sharper than Elena intended, and she immediately regretted them. Even now, even after everything, she didn't want to hurt him. It was a weakness she'd never been able to overcome. Daniel flinched as if she'd slapped him. Elena, I know I haven't been present, attentive, interested. Elena's eyes flashed as she turned back to him. Daniel, 3 months ago, I told you I was worried about chest pains. Do you remember what you said? He opened his mouth, then closed it. The memory was there, hazy and uncomfortable. He'd been reviewing contracts for the Singapore expansion, his phone buzzing with urgent emails. You said, maybe you should cut back on caffeine, without even looking up from your laptop. Elena's voice was steady now, clinical. 2 months ago, I asked if you could come to a doctor's appointment with me. You said you had a board meeting. Last month, when I tried to tell you about the tests Dr. Chen wanted to run, you actually walked out of the room to take a call from your attorney. Each word was a precision strike, and Daniel had no defense. Because she was right. God help him, she was absolutely right. I was building something, he said weakly. For us. For our future. No. Elena's interruption was sharp. You were building an empire, Daniel. But empires are cold, lonely places, and I was tired of being a subject instead of a partner. The door opened with a soft swoosh, and Maria Santos swept in like a protective hurricane. She was smaller than Elena but carried herself with the fierce energy of someone who'd clawed her way up from nothing to become a successful attorney. Her dark eyes immediately locked onto Daniel with undisguised hostility. What is he doing here? Maria's voice could have frozen flame. Maria, please, Elena started. No, Ellie. You don't owe him anything. Not anymore. Maria moved to Elena's bedside, deliberately positioning herself between the sisters and Daniel. You signed the papers. You're free. Daniel stood slowly, his hands clenched at his sides. She's sick, Maria. She needs people who actually care about her well-being more than their stock portfolios. Maria's voice dripped contempt. Where were you when she was having panic attacks about the test results? Where were you when she was so scared she couldn't sleep? What do you think goes through Daniel's mind hearing about Elena's panic attacks? The words hit Daniel like physical blows. Panic attacks. Elena hadn't had those since the early days of their marriage, when his business was struggling and they'd huddle together on their tiny apartment couch, sharing fears and dreams in equal measure. I didn't know. Because you didn't want to know, Maria snapped. It's easier to pretend everything's fine when acknowledging the truth might interfere with your precious meetings. Elena closed her eyes, exhaustion weighing down her limbs like lead. Please stop fighting. Both of you. But Daniel couldn't stop. Something fierce and desperate had awakened in his chest, and he stepped around Maria to face Elena directly. 8 months, he said, his voice rough. Dr. Chun said you've been dealing with this for 8 months. That's when the Yamamoto merger started, when I was traveling to Tokyo twice a month. He ran a hand through his hair. I thought you were angry about the time away. I thought you were pulling back from me. Elena's eyes opened, and for a moment, he saw the woman who used to wait up for him no matter how late his flights arrived. I was pulling back, she admitted quietly. Because every time I tried to reach out, you had somewhere else to be. Someone else who needed you more. That's not true. Isn't it? Elena's voice cracked. When's the last time we had dinner together without your phone on the table? When's the last time you asked me about my day and actually listened to the answer? Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Maria moved closer to her sister, her protective instincts in full force. He made his choice, Ellie. Every day for months, he chose work over you. The divorce papers are just making it official. The papers don't mean anything, Daniel started. They mean everything, Maria interrupted. They mean Elena can finally stop pretending she's married to someone who's already married to his company. Elena felt tears burning behind her closed eyelids. They were talking about her as if she weren't there, these two people she loved in completely different ways. Daniel, with his stubborn pride and workaholic tendencies that had slowly suffocated their marriage. Maria, with her fierce loyalty and barely contained fury at watching her little sister's heart break in slow motion. I need rest, Elena said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Both of you, please. I need to rest. Daniel took a step toward her bed, but Maria's hand shot out to stop him. You heard her. She needs rest. Not more stress, not more empty promises. Rest. Maria's eyes narrowed. Go back to your office, Daniel. Go back to the life you chose. For a moment, Daniel looked like he might argue. His jaw worked, and his hands flexed at his sides. But then he looked at Elena, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion etched in every line of her face. This isn't over, he said quietly, and Elena couldn't tell if it was a promise or a threat. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and Maria immediately turned to her sister with concern softening her fierce expression. How are you feeling, Mija? Elena stared at the ceiling, her heart monitor showing the elevated rhythm that had become her constant companion. Like I just made the biggest mistake of my life, she whispered. Do you think Elena made the right choice sending Daniel away? Tell us what you think in the comments. Daniel made it exactly 47 minutes back at his office before his phone rang. Elena's ringtone, Pachelbel's Canon, the song they danced to at their wedding, cut through his attempt to lose himself in quarterly projections. Mr. Hartwell? Dr. Chen's voice was professionally calm, but Daniel caught the underlying tension. I need you to return to the hospital immediately. His blood turned to ice water. What's wrong? Is Elena? She's stable, but we've encountered a complication. Elena's emergency contact information lists you as her primary contact and medical power of attorney. We need authorization for additional testing, and... Dr. Chen paused. Maria Santos is not legally able to make these decisions. Daniel was already grabbing his keys. I'll be right there. The drive back to Mercy General blurred past in a haze of traffic lights and mounting panic. Medical power of attorney. He'd forgotten about that document, signed 3 years ago when Elena had insisted they both update their wills and medical directives. Back when they still believed they'd grow old together. The elevator to the cardiac wing seemed to move through molasses. When the doors finally opened, Daniel found Maria pacing the hallway like a caged tiger, her professional composure cracked and desperate. Daniel, thank God. The word seemed to physically pain her, but her love for Elena was stronger than her pride. They won't tell me anything. Something about patient confidentiality and legal authorization. What happened? Her heart rate spiked about an hour ago. They rushed her for more tests, But then the hospital administrator showed up with legal documents and... Maria's voice broke. I can't help her. I can't do anything but sit in this damn hallway and wait. For the first time since he'd known Maria, Daniel saw past her fierce armor to the terrified sister underneath. Without thinking, he reached out and squeezed her shoulder. We'll figure this out, he said, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. Dr. Chen appeared at the nurse's station, her expression grave. Daniel, I need to explain the situation. Elena's condition has worsened. The stress from earlier triggered an irregular heartbeat that we need to monitor closely. We're recommending she stay for at least 72 hours for observation and to adjust her medications. Whatever she needs. There's more. Dr. Chen glanced between Daniel and Maria. Elena is resistant to staying. She's insisting she wants to go home, but medically, that would be extremely dangerous right now. She needs someone to help convince her, someone she trusts. Maria let out a bitter laugh. She just sent him away an hour ago, doctor. I don't think trust is exactly. She asked for him, Dr. Chen interrupted gently. When the irregular rhythm started, when she was scared, she asked for Daniel. The words hit Daniel like a physical force. Even now, even after everything, some part of Elena still reached for him when she was afraid. Can I see her? Dr. Chen nodded toward Elena's room. She's awake, but be gentle. Her emotional state is directly impacting her physical condition right now. Daniel pushed open the door to find Elena sitting up in bed, her face flushed with frustrated tears. She looked up as he entered, and he saw relief flash across her features before she could hide it. The doctor says you won't stay for treatment, he said, settling carefully into the chair beside her bed. I can't stay here for 3 days, Daniel. I have work responsibilities. Elena. His voice was soft but firm. Your heart stopped working properly this afternoon. Work can wait. She turned away from him, staring out the window at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the evening dusk. I can't afford 3 days in a cardiac unit. Even with insurance, the bills. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. Elena, what are you talking about? Our insurance. Your insurance, she corrected quietly. The policy is through Hartwell Industries. As of today, I'm not covered anymore. The realization hit him like a sledgehammer. The divorce. The legal separation of their lives. She was right. The insurance policy would terminate with their marriage. That's not. I'll handle it. I'll pay whatever. No. Elena's voice was sharp. I won't take your charity, Daniel. I won't be another one of your acquisitions that you can buy and manage from a distance. Maria appeared in the doorway, having overheard the last part of the conversation. Ellie, this is about your health. Let him pay the damn bills. It's not about the money, Elena said, though they all knew it partly was. It's about... I can't keep depending on him. Not after today. Not after we ended things. Daniel leaned forward, his voice urgent. Elena, listen to me. The papers don't change what I owe you. Don't change that I... He stopped, the words lodging in his throat. What? Elena's eyes met his, and he saw something fragile and hopeful flicker there. What don't they change? What do you think Daniel is struggling to say to Elena? Before Daniel could answer, Dr. Chen returned with a clipboard and a solution neither of them had expected. I've spoken with hospital administration, she said briskly. Given the circumstances, we can keep Elena's coverage active for emergency medical situations during the 30-day waiting period for the divorce to be finalized. Legally, you're still married, which means the insurance issue resolves itself. Elena's face flushed. I'm not staying here for 3 days just because of a technicality. You're staying because if you don't, you could die, Daniel interrupted, his voice rougher than he'd intended. Elena, please. If you won't do it for yourself, do it because I can't. He swallowed hard. I can't lose you. Not like this. The heart monitor picked up speed as Elena stared at him. Daniel. I know I don't have the right to ask, he continued, his hands gripping the chair arms. I know I haven't earned the privilege of being here. But I'm asking anyway. Stay. Let them help you get better. Maria moved to the foot of Elena's bed, her expression softer than Daniel had ever seen it. Mija, he's right. I've been watching you get sicker for months, and I was too scared to push because I thought it would stress you more. But you can't keep pretending you're fine. Elena looked between the two people she loved most, seeing her own fear reflected in their faces. The weight of months of hiding, of managing her illness alone, suddenly felt overwhelming. If I stay, she said quietly, I don't want it to mean anything. This doesn't change what happened today. It doesn't fix anything between us. Daniel nodded, though something in his chest protested the words. I understand. And I want Maria to be listed as my secondary contact. For everything. Of course. Elena closed her eyes, exhaustion pulling at her like undertow. Okay. 3 days. But then I go home, and we figure out how to be divorced people who used to love each other. Daniel felt those last words like a knife between his ribs. Used to love. As if love was something that could be neatly concluded with legal documents and hospital stays. As if he hadn't been in love with her every single day since their first dance, even when he'd been too proud and too scared to show it. What do you think will happen during Elena's 3-day stay? Share your predictions below. The second day of Elena's hospital stay dawned gray and drizzling, matching the mood that had settled over room 314. Daniel had spent the night in the uncomfortable reclining chair, despite Elena's protests that he should go home. Maria had returned to her apartment only after extracting promises from both of them to behave like adults. Elena was picking at her breakfast when Dr. Chun arrived with a stack of files and a concerned expression. Elena, I've been reviewing your complete medical history, and I need to ask you about something. Dr. Chun settled into the visitor's chair, her tone carefully neutral. Last year, you came to see me about fertility concerns. You mentioned you and Daniel had been trying to conceive for several months without success. Daniel's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. Elena's face went pale, and she carefully set down her fork. Dr. Chun, I don't think. The tests we ran then showed some early signs of the cardiac issues we're dealing with now, the doctor continued gently. Elena, did you know that pregnancy with your current heart condition would be extremely high risk? Potentially life-threatening. The silence in the room was deafening. Daniel stared at Elena, pieces of a puzzle he didn't know existed suddenly clicking into place. Elena. His voice was barely a whisper. We stopped trying. Last fall, you said you wanted to wait. I lied. Elena's voice was so quiet he almost didn't hear her. I didn't want to wait. I wanted to have your baby more than anything in the world. Daniel felt the floor shift beneath him. Then why? Because Dr. Chun told me that getting pregnant could kill me. Elena's voice cracked. She said my heart was already showing signs of strain, and that carrying a child could cause complete heart failure. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Daniel's mind reeled, connecting dots that painted a picture he'd been too blind to see. That's when you started pulling away, he said, understanding flooding through him. Last October. You stopped talking about children, stopped. He ran a hand through his hair. Jesus, Elena. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? Elena's eyes filled with tears. That I couldn't give you the family you wanted? That I was broken in a way that no amount of your money or success could fix? Elena, that's not. Isn't it? She turned to face him fully, her composure finally cracking. Daniel, for months you've been talking about the legacy we'd build together. About little feet running through our penthouse. About teaching our kids to be strong and successful. And I had to sit there knowing I could never give you that. Dr. Chun cleared her throat gently. Elena, with proper medical management and monitoring, pregnancy isn't completely impossible. But it would require significant lifestyle changes, constant medical supervision, and a husband who is actually present for doctor's appointments, Elena finished bitterly. A partner who noticed when his wife was falling apart instead of someone who was too busy building an empire to see that his marriage was crumbling. Daniel felt like he'd been punched in the chest. You should have told me. We could have faced it together. When? Elena's voice rose, and immediately the heart monitor began beeping faster. Between your business trips to Asia? During the 30 minutes between your conference calls? Daniel, I tried to have serious conversations with you for months, and you kept saying we'll talk about it later while checking your phone. The truth of her words was devastating because Daniel remembered those conversations now. Half-heard mentions of doctor visits, Elena starting to say something serious before his phone would ring or an urgent email would demand his attention. "There's something else," Dr. Chen said quietly, consulting her notes. "Elena, the stress of keeping this secret, of managing your fear alone, it's contributed significantly to the progression of your heart condition. Emotional stress is a major factor in cardiomyopathy." Daniel's hands clenched into fists. "You're saying her heart is failing because I wasn't paying attention?" "I'm saying that chronic stress and emotional isolation can exacerbate underlying cardiac conditions," Dr. Chen replied carefully. "Elena has been carrying a tremendous burden alone." "What do you think Elena's greatest fear has been throughout this ordeal?" Elena wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to regain her composure. "I kept thinking you'd notice something was wrong. That you'd see I was scared and ask the right questions. But you were so absorbed in the Yamamoto deal, and then the expansion into Europe and I." She took a shaky breath. "I convinced myself that if I could just get through it alone, maybe by the time you were less busy, we could figure out another way to have a family." "Another way?" "Adoption, surrogacy, fostering." Elena's voice grew smaller. "I spent hours researching options, talking to agencies. I have folders full of information about different paths we could take. I thought if I could present you with solutions instead of just problems." Daniel felt his heart breaking in real time. While he'd been negotiating multimillion-dollar deals, Elena had been quietly researching how to build the family they dreamed of, despite her body's limitations. "Where are these folders?" he asked. "In my study. In the filing cabinet behind my desk." Elena looked confused. "Why?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment, remembering the months when Elena had seemed distant, distracted. The times he'd found her crying and she'd claimed it was just hormones or stress. The way she'd stopped bringing up children entirely, changing the subject whenever he mentioned their future family. "Elena, I need to tell you something." His voice was rough with emotion. 3 months ago, when you stopped talking about having kids, when you seemed to pull back from the whole idea, I thought you changed your mind about wanting children with me." Elena's eyes widened. "What?" "I thought maybe you'd realize that my schedule, my work demands, would make me a terrible father. I thought you were protecting yourself from a future where you'd be raising our children alone because I was always at the office." He leaned forward, his voice breaking. "Elena, I started working even more hours because I thought if I could just make the company successful enough, stable enough, maybe I could eventually step back and be the husband and father you deserved." The monitor showed Elena's heart rate spiking as the full irony of their situation became clear. They'd both been trying to protect each other, both making sacrifices in silence, both drawing the wrong conclusions from the other's behavior. "We're idiots," Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Complete idiots," Daniel agreed, reaching for her hand before remembering he might not have that right anymore. Elena saw the hesitation and made the choice for him, intertwining their fingers. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I should have trusted you with the truth." "I should have made space for the truth," he replied. "I should have seen that you were hurting." Dr. Chen quietly gathered her files, recognizing that her patients needed privacy for this conversation. "I'll check back in an hour," she said softly, slipping from the room. Elena squeezed Daniel's hand, feeling the familiar strength and warmth she'd missed desperately. "What do we do now?" "The papers are signed. The lawyers have been paid. We're legally separated." Daniel looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face, the face he'd fallen in love with, the face he'd somehow stopped really seeing in his rush to build their future. "Elena, can I ask you something?" She nodded. "If there was a way, if we could find a path forward together, would you want to try?" What do you think Elena's answer will be? Drop a comment with your thoughts. Elena stared at their intertwined hands for a long moment, her thumb tracing the familiar scar on Daniel's knuckle from when he'd punched a wall in frustration during their 3rd year of marriage. Back then, his company had been struggling, and she'd held ice to his bruised hand while they talked through solutions together. "I don't know," she whispered finally. "Daniel, I want to say yes. God, I want to say yes so badly it physically hurts. But I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of hoping again." Elena's voice cracked. "Of believing we can be different this time, only to watch you disappear behind work again the moment I'm better." Of spending another year feeling like I'm married to a ghost. Daniel felt her words like a physical blow, but he didn't let go of her hand. What if I told you I'd already started making changes? Elena looked up, surprised. What kind of changes? 3 weeks ago, I promoted Rebecca Martinez to Chief Operating Officer. She's been running day-to-day operations while I focused on the Singapore deal. Daniel's voice was quiet but steady. Yesterday, after I left here the first time, I called an emergency board meeting. Daniel, what did you do? I stepped down as CEO. Elena's eyes widened in shock. You what? Rebecca will take over as CEO effective next month. I'm staying on as chairman of the board, but my active involvement will be limited to quarterly meetings and major strategic decisions. Daniel squeezed her hand. Elena, I built that company thinking it was our future. But what good is a fortune if I lose the woman I want to share it with? Elena stared at him, speechless. Hartwell Industries had been Daniel's life for over a decade. The idea of him stepping back was like imagining the sun deciding to take a vacation. But your investors, the board, were surprisingly supportive, Daniel said with a rueful smile. Apparently, Rebecca has been quietly managing most of the company for the past year anyway. The board said my obsession with controlling every detail was actually becoming a liability. Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes. Daniel, you can't make life-altering career decisions because I'm sick. I'm not. His voice was firm. Elena, I've been miserable for months. I just didn't want to admit it because admitting it meant facing how badly I'd screwed up my priorities. He shifted in his chair to face her more fully. Do you remember what I used to say when we first got married? About what success meant to me? Elena smiled through her tears. You said success was coming home to someone who was happy to see you. When's the last time you were happy to see me come home? The question hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Elena thought about the past year, the disappointment when business trips got extended, the loneliness of eating dinner alone, the way her heart had started to sink instead of lift when she heard his key in the door. I used to wait up for you, she said softly. Even when your flights were delayed. I'd fall asleep on the couch with a book in my lap, just so I could see you before bed. You stopped doing that around Christmas. You stopped noticing I was doing it long before I stopped. Daniel winced at the accuracy of her observation. Elena, I want to earn back the right to come home to you. I want to prove that I can be the man you married instead of the workaholic I became. Elena felt her heart rate increase, but this time it wasn't from stress. It was from hope, dangerous, terrifying hope. What about the divorce papers? Papers can be unsigned. Lawyers can be called off. Daniel's voice was gentle but determined. Elena, if you're willing to try, if you think there's any chance we can find our way back to each other, I want to fight for this marriage. What would you do in Elena's position? Tell us in the comments. Elena closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was offering. When she opened them again, Daniel was watching her with an expression she hadn't seen in years, complete, undivided attention. I have conditions, she said finally. Anything. I mean it, Daniel. If we're going to try this, there have to be rules. Boundaries. Changes that we both commit to. Daniel nodded. Tell me. First, my health comes first. Not the company, not investors, not urgent emails. If I have a doctor's appointment, you come with me. If I'm having a bad day, you don't disappear into work. Agreed. Second, we start marriage counseling. Real therapy, not just weekend retreats or self-help books. We need help learning how to communicate again. I already looked up therapists, Daniel admitted. Dr. Sarah Kim comes highly recommended. She specializes in couples dealing with medical challenges. Elena felt a flutter of surprise. You already researched therapists? I researched a lot of things last night. Therapists, support groups for couples dealing with heart conditions, fertility specialists who work with high-risk patients. Daniel's voice grew soft. Elena, if you'll have me, I want to learn everything I can about how to be the partner you need. Elena felt tears spilling down her cheeks again. Daniel. There's more, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. I found this in my desk drawer yesterday. He pulled out a small velvet box that Elena recognized immediately. Is that your grandmother's ring? The one you gave back to me when we decided to use a different engagement ring. Daniel opened the box to reveal a delicate silver band with a small, perfectly clear diamond. You said it was too simple for a wealthy man's wife, but I always loved it because it reminded me of you. Elegant without being flashy. Beautiful without trying to impress anyone. Elena's breath caught. She'd given the ring back 3 years into their marriage when Daniel had insisted on buying her a larger, more expensive engagement ring to match their new social status. She'd never admitted how much it had hurt to lose her grandmother's ring. Why do you have it? Because I kept hoping someday you'd want it back. That someday we'd remember who we were before the money and success complicated everything. Daniel took the ring from the box, his hand steady despite the emotion in his voice. Elena Martinez, will you marry me again? Elena stared at him, her heart monitor going crazy. Daniel, we're already married. Legally, yes. But I want to marry you again. Really marry you this time. With full knowledge of what we're promising each other. I want to vow to put you first, to be present for the hard conversations, to build a life instead of just a fortune. He held up the ring. I want to promise to love you through medical challenges and fertility struggles and whatever else life throws at us. Will you let me try to be worthy of you? Elena looked at the ring, her grandmother's ring, simple and perfect and full of family history. Then at Daniel's face, open and vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen since their early years together. Ask me again in 6 months, she said softly. Daniel's face fell slightly, but Elena continued before he could speak. Ask me again in 6 months, after we've done the work. After therapy and learning to communicate and proving to ourselves that we can be different this time. She reached out and touched the ring gently. But yes, Daniel. If you can prove to me that you mean it, if we can find our way back to being partners instead of strangers living in the same house, then yes, I'll marry you again. Daniel felt relief flood through him like a physical force. 6 months. 6 months, Elena agreed. And Daniel? This time, when we plan our wedding, we're doing it together. No assistants, no wedding planners making decisions without us. Just us, figuring out how to celebrate the life we want to build. Daniel leaned forward and for the first time in months, kissed his wife's forehead. She smelled like hospital soap and antiseptic, but underneath, he caught a hint of her favorite lavender lotion. I love you, Elena. I never stopped loving you. I love you too, she whispered against his hair. That was never the problem. What was the problem? Elena pulled back to look at him, her eyes clear and honest. We forgot how to like each other. But Daniel? I'm starting to remember why I liked you in the first place. Do you think Elena and Daniel can really change their patterns? Share your thoughts below. Elena's 3rd day in the hospital began with cautious optimism. Her heart rhythm had stabilized, the new medication was working, and Dr. Chun had even mentioned the possibility of discharge that afternoon. Daniel had brought her favorite lavender tea from the cafe downtown, and for the first time in months, they'd shared easy conversation about small things, books, movies, the terrible hospital coffee. It felt almost normal. Almost like the couple they used to be. That illusion shattered at 2:47 p.m. when Rebecca Martinez walked into Elena's hospital room carrying a manila envelope and wearing an expression that made Daniel's blood run cold. Rebecca. Daniel stood from his chair beside Elena's bed. What are you doing here? I told you I wasn't taking any calls today. Daniel, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this couldn't wait. Rebecca's voice was carefully controlled, but Elena caught the underlying tension. We have a problem. Elena watched the exchange with growing unease. Rebecca was Daniel's protégée, brilliant and ambitious, the woman who'd been quietly running Hartwell Industries while Daniel focused on expansion deals. She was also someone Elena had never particularly trusted, though she'd never been able to articulate why. What kind of problem? Daniel asked, but Elena noticed he didn't tell Rebecca to leave. Didn't say that whatever it was could wait until Elena was discharged. Rebecca glanced at Elena apologetically. It's about the Yamamoto merger. They're threatening to pull out. Daniel went very still. What? They got word about your transition of responsibilities. About you stepping down as CEO. Rebecca opened the envelope and pulled out several documents. Their legal team is claiming it constitutes a material change in the structure of the deal. They want to renegotiate everything or walk away entirely. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach as she watched Daniel's face. The color had drained from his features, and his hands were clenched at his sides. "How much are we talking about?" His voice was quiet, controlled. $200 million, Daniel. And if Yamamoto walks, it could trigger clauses in the Singapore and Frankfurt deals too. We could be looking at complete collapse of the expansion plans. Elena saw the exact moment when Daniel's priorities shifted. It was subtle, a tightening around his eyes, a change in his posture, but she'd been married to him long enough to recognize when Hartwell Industries took precedence over everything else. "I need to see those documents," Daniel said, reaching for the papers. "Daniel." Elena's voice was soft, but there was steel underneath. "You stepped down, remember? Rebecca is CEO now." Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, Elena, the transition isn't official until next month. And given the circumstances..." What do you think Elena is feeling as she watches this unfold? Given what circumstances? Elena's voice was dangerously quiet. Daniel was already scanning the legal documents, his business mind taking over. "Rebecca, call the lawyers. Set up a conference call with Yamamoto's team for tonight. We can restructure this if we act fast." "Daniel." Elena's voice cut through his planning like a blade. "What are you doing?" He looked up, and Elena saw that the man who had promised to put her first, who had held her hand and talked about changing his priorities, was gone. In his place was the CEO who had slowly destroyed their marriage over the course of 2 years. "Elena, this is important. I'll only be gone for a few hours." "A few hours?" Elena's heart monitor began beeping faster. "Daniel, yesterday you promised me that your company wouldn't come first anymore. That was less than 24 hours ago. This is different. This is a crisis. Our marriage was a crisis." Elena's voice rose, and immediately she felt her chest tighten. "My health was a crisis. But that didn't stop you from taking calls during my doctor appointments or leaving me alone to handle my fears about having children." Rebecca took a step toward the door. "Maybe I should go." "No," Elena said sharply. "Stay. You should hear this." She turned back to Daniel, tears of fury and heartbreak streaming down her face. "Tell me, Daniel, what happens when the Singapore deal has problems? When Frankfurt needs restructuring? When the next crisis emerges that only you can handle?" Daniel's jaw worked as he struggled to find words. "Elena, you're being unreasonable. This is my company. And I'm your wife." The words came out as a broken shout. "Or I was, until we signed papers saying I wasn't." Which apparently was the right decision, because you just proved that nothing has actually changed. The heart monitor was beeping frantically now, and Elena could feel her pulse racing in a way that had nothing to do with her medication. "Elena, calm down. Don't you dare tell me to calm down." Elena's voice was deadly quiet now. "Don't you dare stand there holding papers about another business deal and tell me to calm down when you just proved that every promise you made yesterday was a lie." Daniel looked stricken. "They weren't lies. Elena, I love you. But you love your company more." Elena's voice cracked. "You will always love your company more. Because your company doesn't need emotional support or doctor visits or difficult conversations about the future. Your company just needs you to sign papers and make calls and choose it over everything else in your life." Rebecca cleared her throat uncomfortably. "Daniel, maybe we could handle this tomorrow." "No," Elena interrupted, her eyes fixed on Daniel. "Handle it tonight. Go to your meeting. Save your merger." She reached up with shaking hands and pulled off her wedding ring, the simple band that had replaced her grandmother's ring years ago. "But don't come back here pretending you're ready to be a different person." "Elena, don't." She held out the ring to him. "Take it." "No. Take it, Daniel. Because if you walk out that door to go save a business deal instead of staying here with your sick wife, then we both know this marriage is already over." Daniel stared at the ring, then at Elena's face, then at the papers in his hand. Elena could see the war playing out behind his eyes. Duty versus love, fear versus trust, the familiar versus the unknown. "The deadline for response is midnight," Rebecca said quietly. If we don't act tonight, Yamamoto walks tomorrow morning. Elena watched Daniel's face and saw the exact moment when he made his choice. His shoulders straightened, his expression hardened into the mask of corporate responsibility she'd grown to hate. "I'll be back in 3 hours," he said, tucking the papers under his arm. Elena closed her eyes, the ring still extended toward him. "No, you won't. Elena. You won't come back because in 3 hours, there will be another crisis. Another urgent call. Another reason why the company needs you more than I do." She opened her eyes, and Daniel flinched at the finality he saw there. "This is who you are, Daniel. This is who you've always been. I was stupid to think you could change." Maria appeared in the doorway, having arrived for evening visiting hours, just in time to witness the destruction of her sister's second chance at happiness. "What's going on?" Maria's voice was sharp with concern as she took in Elena's tears and Daniel's guilty expression. "Daniel was just leaving," Elena said, her voice hollow. "He has important business to attend to." Maria's eyes narrowed as she looked between them. "Daniel, what did you do?" "I have to handle a crisis at work." "Get out." Maria's voice was ice-cold. "Get out before I call security." Daniel looked at Elena one last time, his face a mask of regret and stubborn determination. "Elena, I'll be back. We can talk about this when." "When what?" "When your business is more important than your wife again." Elena's voice broke. "There's nothing left to talk about, Daniel. Go save your company. It's clearly the only relationship you know how to maintain." Daniel hesitated at the door, but the papers in his hand seemed to weigh more than Elena's broken heart. He walked out without another word, leaving behind the sound of Elena's sobs and the frantic beeping of monitors that showed a heartbreaking in real time. Do you think Daniel made the right choice? What would you have done? Tell us in the comments. Daniel sat in his corner office at 11:42 p.m., surrounded by legal documents and empty coffee cups, staring at the phone that would connect him to the Yamamoto conference call in 18 minutes. The merger papers were spread across his mahogany desk like tarot cards predicting a future built on profit margins and market share. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Legal team is ready. Yamamoto's people are standing by. This is it, Daniel." But all Daniel could think about was the sound Elena's wedding ring had made when it hit the hospital floor after he'd refused to take it. The small metallic clink that had echoed like a gunshot in the silence of room 314. He picked up his desk phone, then set it down. Picked it up again. $200 million. The culmination of 3 years of negotiations. The deal that would cement Hartwell Industries as a global powerhouse. Against that, Elena's tear-stained face. The way she'd looked at him as if seeing him clearly for the first time in years, and being devastated by what she saw. "This is who you are, Daniel. This is who you've always been." His office door opened without a knock, and Maria Santos walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee and an expression that could have melted steel. "Maria." Daniel stood, surprised. "How did you get past security?" "I told them I was your lawyer." Maria set one coffee cup on his desk and kept the other. "Which, given that I'm about to give you the most important legal advice of your life, isn't entirely untrue. If you're here to tell me what a bastard I am, I'm here to tell you a story." Maria settled into the chair across from his desk without invitation. "About the night Elena fell in love with you." Daniel's hand froze over the phone. "Maria, I don't have time." "Make time." Maria's voice brooked no argument. "It was 7 years ago. That charity gala where you first met. Elena came home at 2 in the morning, still in her evening gown, and woke me up to tell me about this incredible man she'd met." Despite himself, Daniel found himself listening. "She said you'd spent the entire evening ignoring the other wealthy donors to help serve food in the kitchen. Said when she asked why, you told her that writing checks was easy, but actually helping people required showing up." Maria took a sip of her coffee. "Elena said she knew she was in trouble when you rolled up your sleeves and started washing dishes in a $1,000 tuxedo." Daniel remembered that night. Elena had appeared beside him at the industrial sink, her designer dress protected by a ridiculous frilly apron, laughing as soap bubbles got in her hair. "That's the man she fell in love with," Maria continued. "The one who understood that showing up was more important than sending money. The one who chose connection over convenience." What do you think Daniel is realizing about himself right now? Maria, this is different. This is my company. This is your excuse. Maria leaned forward, her voice gentle but implacable. Daniel, I've watched you build that company into something incredible. But somewhere along the way, you started believing that your worth as a man was measured by your success as a CEO. Daniel felt something crack in his chest. If this deal falls through, then it falls through. And you'll figure out another way. Because that's what successful people do, they adapt. Maria stood, her expression softening. But if you lose Elena, if you let her slip away because you were too scared to choose love over money, that's not something you adapt to. That's something you regret for the rest of your life. The phone on Daniel's desk rang. Rebecca's number. Daniel stared at it, then at Maria, then at the wedding photo on his desk that he'd somehow forgotten was there. Elena in her simple white dress, both of them laughing at something his best man had said. They looked young and hopeful and completely in love. He let the phone ring. Elena's heart stopped for 43 seconds yesterday, Maria said quietly. Did you know that? While you were in your first meeting about this crisis, my sister's heart literally stopped beating. The blood drained from Daniel's face. What? Dr. Chen managed to get it started again, but Elena made me promise not to tell you. She said you had enough to worry about. Maria's voice cracked slightly. Even while she was dying, Daniel, she was trying to protect you from having to choose between her and your company. Daniel felt the room spinning around him. 43 seconds. Elena's heart had stopped, and he'd been in a conference room discussing quarterly projections. Why are you telling me this? Because Elena has spent 3 years making excuses for your choices. 3 years protecting you from having to face the consequences of putting work first. Maria moved toward the door, then turned back. I'm not going to do that. This time, you get to make your choice with full knowledge of what you're choosing between. The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Daniel looked at the caller ID. Rebecca. The meeting. The merger. The future of his company. Then he looked at the wedding photo again. Elena's smile, radiant and trusting. The way she'd looked at him like he was capable of anything. The way she'd never look at him again if he took this call. Daniel's hand moved toward the phone, then stopped. He thought about the folders Elena had mentioned, the adoption research, the fertility specialists, the family planning she'd done alone while he was building an empire. He thought about her collapse in the courthouse, about her sitting in doctors' offices afraid and alone while he negotiated deals that suddenly seemed meaningless. He thought about Rebecca's words, the transition isn't official until next month. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He was still CEO. Still legally responsible for every decision, every crisis, every deal. Stepping down on paper meant nothing if he couldn't step away in practice. The phone rang again. This time, Daniel picked it up. Rebecca. Daniel, thank God. Yamamoto is getting impatient. Are you ready for the call? Daniel closed his eyes, Elena's words echoing in his memory. You will always love your company more. Rebecca, I need you to listen carefully. I'm listening. Call Yamamoto. Tell them we're withdrawing from the merger. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. Daniel, what are you talking about? This is a $200 million deal. And it's not worth my marriage. Daniel's voice was steady, certain. Rebecca, as of right now, you are CEO of Hartwell Industries. Not next month. Right now. The Yamamoto deal is your decision to make. Daniel, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Daniel was already reaching for his car keys. Handle it however you think is best. If you can save the deal, save it. If you can't, then we'll find another way to grow the company. But the investors will understand that companies survive failed mergers every day. But marriages. Daniel's voice caught. Maria, thank you. For everything. Maria nodded, tears in her eyes. Go get her, Daniel. Before it's too late. Daniel ran for the elevator, his heart pounding with something that felt like terror and hope in equal measure. For the first time in years, he was about to choose love over money, connection over control, showing up over sending someone else to handle it. The question was whether Elena would still want him to choose her. Do you think Daniel made the right decision? What do you think Elena's reaction will be? Share your thoughts below. Daniel's Mercedes screeched into the hospital parking garage at 12:23 a.m., tires squealing against concrete as he took the turns too fast. He abandoned the car in a loading zone and ran for the elevators, his expensive suit wrinkled and his tie askew for the first time in recent memory. The cardiac ward was dimly lit at this hour, most patients asleep behind closed doors. But room 314 glowed with soft lamplight, and through the window, Daniel could see Elena sitting up in bed, staring out at the city lights below. She wasn't alone. Maria sat in the visitor's chair, and Dr. Chun was reviewing something on Elena's chart. As Daniel approached, he could hear fragments of their conversation. "Discharge papers are ready for tomorrow morning," Dr. Chun was saying. "But Elena, you'll need someone to stay with you for at least a week. The new medication requires monitoring, and you shouldn't be alone if you have any episodes." "I'll stay with her," Maria said immediately. "My apartment has a guest room." "No." Elena's voice was soft but firm. "Maria, you've put your life on hold enough for me. I'll be fine on my own." "Elena, that's not medically advisable," Dr. Chun started. "Then I'll hire a nurse," Elena interrupted. "I have some savings, and once the divorce is final, I'll figure out a more permanent solution." Daniel felt each word like a physical blow. She was planning a future without him, making practical arrangements for a life where he didn't exist. He knocked softly on the doorframe. 3 heads turned toward him in surprise. Maria's expression immediately hardened. Dr. Chun looked confused, and Elena just looked tired. "Daniel." Dr. Chun glanced at her watch. "What are you doing here? Visiting hours ended hours ago." "I told him not to come back," Elena said quietly, not meeting his eyes. "I know." Daniel stepped into the room, his hands shaking slightly. "Elena, I need to tell you something. If it's about your meeting." "I didn't go to the meeting." Elena's eyes snapped to his, surprise flickering across her features. "What?" "I walked away. From the meeting, from the deal, from all of it." Daniel moved closer to her bed, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was saying. "The Yamamoto merger is dead. $200 million gone." Maria's eyebrows shot up. "Daniel, what did you do?" "What I should have done 3 years ago. I chose my wife over my company." Daniel's eyes never left Elena's face. "Elena, Rebecca is CEO now. Really CEO, not just on paper. I signed the transition documents an hour ago." Elena stared at him, her heart monitor showing an increased rhythm. "Daniel, you can't make business decisions because you're angry about a fight." "I'm not angry. And this wasn't about our fight." Daniel sat carefully on the edge of her bed. "This was about finally understanding what Maria told me tonight." "What did she tell you?" Daniel glanced at Maria, who nodded encouragingly. "She told me about the night we met. About how you fell in love with a man who understood that showing up was more important than sending money." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Daniel. I forgot that man somewhere along the way. I forgot that the most important deals aren't made in boardrooms. They're made in hospital rooms and kitchens and quiet moments when someone you love needs you to just be present." Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the small velvet box containing Elena's grandmother's ring. "Elena, I know I asked you to marry me again yesterday. And I know you said to ask again in 6 months. Daniel, what are you doing?" "I'm not asking you to marry me." Daniel opened the box, the small diamond catching the lamplight. "I'm asking if you'll wear this ring while we figure out how to be married to each other. Really married. Partners instead of strangers." Elena's hands flew to her mouth. "You're asking me to stay married to you?" "I'm asking if you'll let me prove that I can be the husband you deserve. That I can choose us over everything else, every single day." Daniel's voice cracked with emotion. "Elena, you said I'd always love my company more than you. But tonight, when I had to choose between saving a deal and saving my marriage, there was no choice. There was never any choice." "What do you think Elena is feeling in this moment?" Dr. Chun cleared her throat gently. "I should mention that Elena's heart episode yesterday, it wasn't just stress-related. Daniel and Elena both turned to her, alarmed. The good news is that the new medication is working better than we hoped. Elena's heart function has already improved significantly. With proper care and stress management, there's no reason she can't live a completely normal life. What about children? Elena asked quietly. What about pregnancy? Dr. Chen smiled. With careful monitoring and the right medical team, pregnancy is definitely possible. It would be considered high risk, but many women with similar conditions have healthy pregnancies and deliveries. Elena felt her world shift on its axis. Really? Really? And there are also excellent fertility specialists who work specifically with cardiac patients. If you decide you want to explore that path. Daniel reached for Elena's hand. Whatever path you want to explore, I want to walk it with you. Doctor's appointments, fertility consultations, adoption agencies, whatever feels right to you, to us. Elena looked down at their joined hands, then at the ring box still open in Daniel's palm. The lawyers said the divorce papers are already filed. Papers can be unfiled, Daniel said softly. If that's what you want. What about your company? Your investors? Rebecca is brilliant. Hartwell Industries will be fine without me micromanaging every decision. Daniel's voice was certain. And if the investors don't like it, they can find a new company to invest in. There are plenty of CEOs who'll sacrifice their marriages for profit margins. I'm just not one of them anymore. Elena looked at Maria, who was openly crying now. What do you think, sis? I think, Maria said through her tears, that he finally figured out what matters. Elena turned back to Daniel, studying his face in the soft lamplight. She saw exhaustion there and fear, and something she'd been afraid to hope for, complete, undivided attention. Daniel, if we do this, if we try again, things have to be different. They will be. I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that when I tell you I need you, you'll come. Even if there's a crisis at work, even if it's inconvenient, even if Rebecca can handle it better than you can. Elena, I promise you that for the rest of our lives, you will never have to compete with my work for my attention. You will always come first. Elena held out her left hand, her ring finger bare and waiting. Then ask me again. Daniel took the ring from the box, his hand steady now. Elena Martinez, will you stay married to me? Will you let me spend the rest of our lives proving that I know how to love you the way you deserve? Yes, Elena whispered, watching as he slipped her grandmother's ring back onto her finger where it belonged. Yes, but Daniel? What? Next time I collapse in a courthouse, I expect you to catch me before I hit the ground. Daniel laughed through his tears, leaning forward to kiss his wife's forehead. Next time you're in a courthouse, it better be for something happy. Like adopting our children or renewing our vows. Our vows. Elena smiled, the first real smile Daniel had seen from her in months. In 6 months, like you said. We're going to plan it together this time. No assistants, no event planners. Just us, figuring out how to promise each other forever. Dr. Chen gathered her charts, clearly recognizing that her patients needed privacy. Elena, you're cleared for discharge in the morning. But I want to see you in my office next week to discuss your long-term care plan. We'll be there, Daniel said, emphasizing the we. As the doctor left, Maria stood to follow her out. I'll give you two some time alone. Maria, Daniel called after her. Thank you. For tonight, for everything. For loving Elena enough to make me face the truth. Maria paused at the door. Daniel, hurt her again and I'll destroy you. Professionally, personally, completely. Fair enough, Daniel said. But you won't have to. I'm never letting her go again. After Maria left, Elena and Daniel sat in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined, Elena's grandmother's ring catching the light from the city below. Daniel. Elena's voice was soft in the quiet room. I love you. All of you. The successful businessman and the man who washes dishes in expensive tuxedos. But I'm glad you remembered that you're both. Daniel brought her hand to his lips, kissing the ring that symbolized not just their past, but their future. I love you too, Elena. And I promise you, this time, I'm going to get it right. Outside their window, the city hummed with late-night energy, full of people making choices about love and money, success and sacrifice. But in room 314, two people who had almost lost each other were choosing love at last. What did you think of Daniel and Elena's journey back to each other? Drop a comment below and let us know if you believe in second chances for love. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.